Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben immigrasieprocureur hier in Amerika en ik wil jou helpen om immigratiewet te verstaan. Nou, eerste, ik het niet meer a Barney. And maybe I'll tell you why in a little bit, but it was time for a change, so hopefully this doesn't disturb y'all too much. But now I know that I look less like an attorney, more like a used car salesman, but it is what it is. And with my genetics, it'll grow back in about 6 minutes. So if I decide to grow it back, it's fine. But I wanted to get that out of the way. Want you to think I was just punking y'all and changing my facial hair for a random video. But all that being said, I wanted to make a quick update on my reach out to the Amerikaners group concerning whether or not Afrikaners outside of South Africa and other ethnic minorities who have a well-founded fear of future persecution and meet all of the requirements for the refugee program can apply for the program. Because, as you've seen, the Amerikaners group currently has denied people automatically one of the drop-down menus to submit the statement of interest or the application through them. Asks if you're currently in South Africa. If you say no when you hit submit, it automatically rejects you and says that this is a program only for people currently in South Africa. So I've committed myself to all of the Afrikaners who are no longer in South Africa and in other places around the world, but not in the United States, because remember, by U.S. law, you cannot be a refugee currently in the United States, to get an answer to this question. And like I've said, Amerikaners has been great. I've now received contact from 2 people from that group, and both were very polite and very understanding. And I merely said to them, I said, look, I'm reaching out because I'm an immigration attorney here in the United States. I have this YouTube channel. I have a very large audience of Afrikaners who are interested in the refugee program. And I have a platform where I could reach and answer a lot of questions if you would give me answers to it. And I explained the problem that I had with this concept of you cannot apply if you're not in South Africa. My point being that because traditionally a refugee is defined as someone who has already fled their home country, so the Afrikaner refugee program is already on its face different. It's modified. It's not entirely unique. There have been programs like this before, but it is for refugees who are currently still in the country where they're facing persecution. Now, the original statement on the U.S. Embassy's website did not say anything, or that the program precluded, or excluded rather, Afrikaners who had already left South Africa. So it only had the 4 requirements, not the 5th that you see on the Amerikaners website for the program. And I said that the 5th requirement, the Amerikaners requirement, makes sense, but not at their level. Because there is a bar to any refugee program and to asylum if a potential refugee or a potential asylee has firmly resettled in another country, meaning they've taken advantage of the relief offered in the country that they fled to another country, or relief is available to them and they simply have not taken advantage of it. You can't claim I went to a country and even though they offered me asylum or refugee status there, I didn't take it. That doesn't count. Now, that's a determination that has to be made at the USCIS level. That's where they will decide whether or not someone has firmly resettled. And we've talked about all these bars before. There's the past persecutor bar, there's a particular serious crime bar, there's the firm resettlement bar. All of these things bar you from taking advantage of a refugee program, or if you're here in the States, an asylum program. But again, it's USCIS, the U.S. government, that would adjudicate at that point, not the initial screener. So I reached out to them, and they were very kind in responding to me. They're going to get the information and get back. Now, the reason that I'm following up with this is I did receive a few emails from people and messages from people who, again, have said that they have been denied or rejected from that initial drop-down menu, but also an email from Amerikaners, and this is the same individual who emailed me and said they're going to get back to me, and this is probably before she actually emailed me and said that, they were going to look into it and give me an answer as soon as they could. But this is one of those things where I'm just confused. And it's not the Amerikaners' fault. It's not. There's a lot of moving wheels in this, so we're trying to figure out what the answer is. So don't get mad at this person. This person's been great to me. She emailed me, we're discussing, and I said, look, use my platform to disseminate information if you want. But this email that I saw that was forwarded to me said, come back to South Africa, and when you get here, we can discuss your options. You see, this is where I have a problem. And this is where it confuses me so much, and why I need an answer to this question. Because the thought of returning And I've now talked about this so many times over and over again, but the point still needs to be made. And this is mostly for not just y'all in South Africa and Afrikaners who have already fled South Africa to other countries, but also for how the United States perceives this refugee program, which in the court of public opinion is a pretty big idea, right? Now, again, 99.9% of Americans don't care, don't give a damn, don't even know about this Afrikaner refugee program. But as you know, with news cycles, with things, once the government shutdown ends, you don't know if and when this will pop back in the news. So you want to make sure that you are standing on firm ground to support your position, which is the second reason why this channel exists, to educate Americans on the travesties and persecution that is going on inside Africa against Afrikaners, other people of white European descent, and other ethnic minorities. But all of this talk of returning, or even the Amerikaners group saying, come back to South Africa and we'll discuss your options there. To me, someone who has worked in immigration law for the last 5-6 years now, and I've told you what I do is for the firm that I work for, I'm their appellate attorney. I write all of their briefs to the Board of Immigration Appeals. So the last level, if you're here trying to file for asylum and you get rejected by USCIS, you then get denied by the immigration courts, you're ordered removed, you can appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals. It's kind of like the last step below the federal appellate courts getting involved. And I have seen so many cases dismissed where the courts have used what USCIS, DHS, the State Department, what they use to define persecution. I've seen so many cases dismissed where the courts have said, this is not persecution. These beatings, these events, these horrible things you hear happen to people, because it didn't happen enough, or it wasn't connected to a nexus, or it wasn't prolonged, or it wasn't severe and extreme enough. I've seen so many of these claims dismissed that when I hear people say, oh, come back or return, but return to the place where you fear that persecution, to me, it undermines everything about it. And that's one of the things that I think y'all need to be aware of too, that the world also perceives that too. So when we hear people say, hey, come back and then apply for this program, or come back and do this, a lot of people go, wait a minute, I thought you fear, this well-founded fear of future persecution. I showed you in the last video, it's extreme and outrageous conduct. It's more than mere discrimination and harassment. It's threats to life and liberty. Examples that don't raise the level of life are things like assault, battery, rape, torture, right? These are serious things done by the government or someone the government is unable or unwilling to control because of an immutable characteristic, something you can't change, something you shouldn't have to change. So if you can't change that you're not Afrikaner, if you can't change that you're white, why would you go back to South Africa where the government or someone they won't or can't control is going to do these extreme things to you because of your race? So when I hear that said come back, not only do I cringe a little bit because of what I know about immigration law and the laws that we used for these programs, but also because I know the optics of how that looks to the rest of the world. And, just be aware of that. So this idea of returning does not make sense to me. Now, that's point number one. Point number two, for all of you who've already fled, the fact that you should be eliminated from this program or not be able to take part in this program at the initial step doesn't make sense to me either. Because refugees have always been defined as people who've already fled. Just because this program is different doesn't mean that it should exclude Afrikaners who've already fled. Or if it does, then it should only exclude them based on the firm resettlement bar, which is not the level that Amerikaners or Church World Services or any of these other groups are allowed to adjudicate at or should be adjudicating at. That's the level of USCIS. They should make that decision based on the evidence presented to them. So that's just what I'm throwing out there. But again, this isn't an attack. Sorry, I got the dogs in the office with me still working on the house, and one dog just stepped on the other dog. There's actually 3 hunde in here now. Met my kantoor, met my. So they're just stepping on each other. But I digress. Sorry, ADD. The point being that it's USCIS that makes the determination, and I'm not bashing Amerikaners. I think they're great. I think they're awesome. The person who sent this email that I'm questioning is also one of the people who reached out to me, and I said, let me help y'all. Like, find the information. Let me give it to y'all. I'm just saying, as someone who works in this field, it doesn't make sense to me that Afrikaners who are not in South Africa will be excluded. And you've heard people like Colonel Wyatt say it's an in-country program, and it may be. The government can make whatever rules it wants for these refugee programs, just like it does for asylum guidance here in the United States. But I haven't seen that. All I've seen are the 4 requirements on the U.S. Embassy's website, which makes sense when we're talking about refugee programs that we've seen in the past, and then the Amerikaners issue with people being denied if they've already left South Africa, which again doesn't make sense unless they firmly resettled, which has always been a bar to these programs. But the firm resettlement bar has to be determined by USCIS, the same group that determines whether or not your well-founded fear of future persecution is legitimate. That's their level, not the level of the initial screeners. So I hope to get an answer from them soon. I'll keep you posted. Hope you like the new mustache and look. Remember to like, subscribe, share, consider becoming a channel member if you haven't, and I'll see you for the next video.